Sahar Francis is coming to us from Ramallah. She's the director of Addameer Association based in Ramallah, and her job is actually to look after prisoners in Israeli jails. So she knows this topic very well. And we also have Sobhi al-Zobaidi with us. He's a filmmaker, and he did make a film pertaining to this topic. He's a writer. And also, he's the owner of the only Palestinian restaurant here.
Yeah.
Called
What's the name of the restaurant?
Sorry?
What's the name of the restaurant?
It's called Tamam, and I made a mistake of actually not going there until last week. And now, I only arrived like 5 months ago to the city. But so we'll give them the floor. I have a meeting on Burnaby campus. I'm leaving in half an hour. And he's carrying the flag after me. And this is my colleague Adel Iskandar, who is amazing, by the way.
The amazing Adam.
Thank you.
You're too kind. Thank you.
Actually, and before we start, we of course need to acknowledge that we are on unceded Coast Salish territory, the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Thank you.
Thanks. We will start with the
I actually probably Sahar arrived from Ramallah fresh, so I haven't been to Ramallah only twice in the last 10 years. So my testimony is really not as truthful as Sahar, who's been working and representing. I am sitting here because it happened that in 2001, I produced a long documentary film about Palestinian political prisoners in the aftermath of their release from Israeli prisons after the signing of Oslo Agreement. I worked in the documentary film for about 2 years. I gathered tons of information. I did research for about 1.5 years. And I will see how the discussion goes, but maybe I'll show you a few excerpts from the film. And I share whatever information I have gathered from working on this film back then. But mostly, I think we will give the floor to Sahar again. She's working in the field, and also Addameer. They produced a short documentary film about 11 minutes that focuses on children prisoners in Israeli jails. We will show the film at some point, but maybe you wanna say a few things about the film for sure.
So thanks a lot, Amel, for making this event and organizing it. And thank you for coming to meet with us today and to hear about the Palestinian political prisoners. So as it was mentioned, Addameer is a Palestinian organization that we were founded in late 91, in the late years of the first Intifada, as a legal program actually at the beginning to represent Palestinian prisoners under the Israeli occupation in military, especially in military court system. But we developed since then to include monitoring and documentation via monthly visits to all of the prisons and detention centers. And of course, based on our legal work and the documentation, we do the advocacy work like these documentaries and meetings, speaking tours, and UN-related work on the issue of the prisoners. So we were trying to raise awareness, but as well we are very interested in the networking and the movement with other political prisoners all over. So this is why Addameer was involved as well with political prisoners issues in the United States, in the European context, like in the Basque country. In Latin America lately, we are trying to develop contacts with ex-prisoners and prisoners organizations, because we believe there is lots of similarities when it comes for such systems of oppression and control against oppressed people to use the imprisonment in order to keep the control. So we found it's very powerful as well to struggle together in order to face such carceral policies all over the world. So I think let's start with a short video about the detention of child cases in East Jerusalem. The documentary is focusing on the cases of the East Jerusalem kids that they are subjected, by the way, for the civil system, because Israel decided to annex East Jerusalem back in the 70s, so they are enforcing the Israeli laws. So these children are not arrested under the military court system that I would be focusing on later. And but then they are imprisoned in the same prisons with the other Palestinian prisoners. So it's just the legal procedures that is a bit different, but later on the conditions, and of course they face the same torture, ill-treatment. After the film, we can discuss more about the current situation of the political prisoners. I'll take questions after, but allow me first to start with a short brief about the current situation, because this is a bit old, like in 2016, and since then lots of things happened in the imprisonment level in the occupied territories. In 2017 alone, more than 1,700 children were arrested from all over the occupied territories, which means East Jerusalem, the West Bank. Gaza, it's much less because actually, as you know, Gaza is under a blockade. No one can go out, no one can enter. And whenever they arrest, mostly they arrest people that they reach the Erez checkpoint in order to go to get health treatment. So they use this fact that you need to go to the West Bank and they arrest people, or whenever there's a war and an attack like in 2014 on Gaza. Currently there's 6,200 prisoners in the Israeli prisons, all of them of course located in prisons inside Israel. This is the violation, a serious violation for the international law, because as occupiers, they were supposed to keep the prisoners in the occupied territories. But of course, Israel systematically violates international law without any accountability, so they don't care actually. And the High Court twice rejected our petitions about this issue, that this is a war crime, transferring the prisoners to inside Israel, but it was rejected by the High Court, and the High Court confirms such practices. There is 350 children out of the 6,000, so not all of the 1,700 that they were subjected last year for imprisonment would be kept in detention, especially from East Jerusalem. This harassment can last for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks under interrogation. And when they are released, mostly they would be subjected for house arrest for several weeks or sometimes several months. But later on, they could be not charged at all. Like they would be arrested based on claiming they were involved in throwing stones, but it could end up without any conviction at the end. But it's the harassment, the torture, the ill-treatment, and the harsh experience actually that they would face. And this is intentionally done in order to affect a whole generation. Actually, why Israel is arresting more than 1,500 children each year? Because they know exactly how much the impact on the whole society, mainly on the children, but as well on the family, sometimes not just the close family, but the whole neighborhood would be affected from such mass arrest campaigns. And in such villages like in Nabi Saleh or Bil'in or Na'lin, later maybe we can discuss more about Ahd's Tamimi case, but when they come to raid in Nabi Saleh village and they arrest 20 children in the same night, the purpose would be, beside the terrifying and the torture, information gathering. Because most of these children, like it was documented, it's very easily to confess after such harassment. So those children would be disclosed who's organizing the mass movement in the village every week, demonstrations against the wall and against the settlements. They would give names without recognizing that they become collaborators with the interrogators, and later on they would come and arrest the adult activists. Actually, this is what happened with Bassem Tamimi, the father of Ahd, a couple of years ago. He was convicted based on 4 children confessions from his own village to point him that he was the organizer of the weekly demonstrations and he was inciting for throwing stones. Out of the total number, there is currently 450 detainees that they are arrested based on secret information without any concrete charge against them. This is what we call the administrative detention policy. That is based on, of course, the security regulations from the mandate, the British security regulations from the mandate time on Palestine that Israel continued to use after the 48, and it became part of the legal system, whether inside Israel or in the military court system via military orders. Any military governor can issue any detention order based on a secret information for up to 6 months, and it could be renewed indefinitely, which means you could be arrested years under detention without knowing why you are arrested and when you would be released. In 2015, 2016, more than 6 children were facing administrative detention as well. It's used against anyone. Adults, children, women, men, political leaders, students, anyone could be subjected for administrative detention, irrelevant to your age, of course. Currently, there's still 2 children under administrative detention, and around 6 legislative council members that they were elected as political representatives back in 2006. In one time, in 2007, there were more than 40 parliamentarians arrested, and this is how Israel actually paralyzed the whole Palestinian parliament back in 2000. Since then, they never convened, because in any current moment, there is at least 11, 12 parliamentarians that they are in prison. This is actually how they use the imprisonment in order to interfere in every aspect of our life, including our political decision and, of course, self-determination. Currently, there's Khalida Jarrar, that she used to be, by the way, the director of Addameer till 2005, when she resigned to be elected to the parliament, and I replaced her. And she became the head of the Political Prisoners Committee in the parliament. Khalida, in 2014, she was facing a deportation order, or more concrete, an order that enforced her to leave Ramallah, her living city, to Jericho. Imagine, like both Ramallah and Jericho under the Palestinian Authority jurisdiction. So what's the point? Like, why Khalida is so dangerous in Ramallah and she's stopped to be such a threat in Jericho? God knows. Secret information, of course. When we argued, so immediately Khalida, instead of fulfilling the order, she was taking herself, sitting in the parliament yard, manifesting there for 1 month. And we argued the case in the court. In the same time, an international campaign was initiated by parliamentarians, mostly from the Interparliamentarian Union on the international level. And after 1 month, out of a sudden, the military governor shortened the order for 1 month. So he canceled the deportation order. She was going back to her home. After 4 months, she was arrested from her home, from the middle of Ramallah city. She was facing conviction, like charge sheet. She was convicted and arrested for 15 months. That was ending in the 1st of July 2016. 2017, 1st of July, they came, they arrested her again. Now she's under administrative detention for the second time. So her detention was extended in last January for another 6 months. And this is an example of how political leaders, how community activists, how, by the way, Salah Hamouri, our field researcher, is under administrative detention that was just renewed in the 28th of February. After 6 months, now it's renewed for 4 months. So both Khalida and Salah are currently under administrative detention, and this shows how easy anyone could be arrested because of his civil activism in his own society. Khalida, when she was convicted, all of the charges were about her role as a parliamentarian, like representing a terrorist group, the Popular Front, but all of her activity was demonstrations, supporting hunger strike prisoners, and visiting ex-prisoners, and such activities, like her public activity in the community. So currently there's 62 female prisoners in the Israeli prisons. Out of them, there's still 6 like children that they are under 18. Of course, the female prisoners are held in 2 prisons, and the children are in the same section with the adults, but they are separate in their own rooms. The child detainees in the Israeli prisons, mostly they are separated in their own sections, but when it comes for the treatment, they are treated the same as the adults. There's no privileges that these children would get under detention. So there is no proper education. In some cases, when they are less than 16, they get 4 hours a day, like Arabic, English, and mathematics, the basics. There's no history, no geography, no chemical, like nothing that can cause incitement according to the Israeli system. Most of these children would drop out of school when they are released because they would need to repeat their class, and they would shy, and they would, like, as you saw, Sundus was a very, like when she was released, it was very hard to go back to cope in the normal life outside. Lots of these children, they would develop post-traumatic symptoms after their release, especially if they would be tortured and harassed a lot in the interrogation or in the transfer experience from court to the prison or from the prison to the court. There is lots of sexual harassment against female prisoners and child prisoners. Yet it's not like in these years, it's not including physical attack, but of course in the 70s and the 80s, the early years of the 80s, it included rape in some cases for adult male or female prisoners under interrogation. But mostly now we report verbal harassment that includes threatening to be raped, but the abuse could be strip search. And against female prisoners, the strip search can include intimidating, very intimidating strip search, even if it's done by a woman soldier or a policewoman, but still it's very degrading experience. Of course, there's lots of details to be discussed about the legal procedures, whether under the civil system or the military system, how both systems actually, even though inside Israel the criminal system is supposed to be applying the international standards of the fair trial, but of course all these prisoners are classified as security prisoners, so automatically there is differences in the treatment, in the procedures, and on the rules that imposed on them. There is differences in the length of the interrogation, when you are supposed to be charged before the court, and what's the kind of sentence that you could be facing. In the military system, it's much different. Like starting from the language, that it's Hebrew in these military courts, and of course Palestinians, they don't speak Hebrew, they don't learn Hebrew. The translation is done by soldiers It's not professional translators. And I don't know if you got to see, lately there were like parts from the case against Ahd, how Ahd enters to the court and she's busy to see her family, her father mostly, because the mother is arrested with her as well. Nariman is also under detention. And she wouldn't be even like interested in what's going on with the court, because these 5 minutes, 6 minutes or whatever, this is the only chance where Ahd can meet her father, because Bassem, as an ex-prisoner, he would never be getting a permit to go to visit Ahd or Nariman in the detention. The only place where now Bassem can meet his wife and his daughter is these small sessions in the military court, and of course he wouldn't be allowed to talk to her. He can see her, he can shout, but if he would try to talk to her, he would be kicked out of the military court. So when it comes for the conditions in the prisons, all of these prisoners face like lots of punishments based on, of course, claiming that you violated the prison orders. So if you shout, if you try to talk to another prisoner, like in another cell or whatever, no matter what you did, you could be punished for canceling your family visits for 1 month or 2 months, or in some cases much more. Like in 2007, when they punished the whole Palestinian prisoners from Gaza, more than 750 prisoners were rejected family visits for over than 5 years. Till 2000 June, no, they restarted the visits in August 2012. After, of course, the hunger strike of 2012. So they can use collective punishment and individual punishment. You could be isolated in solitary confinement for sometimes several years, not even months, as a punishment, because the solitary confinement could be as well as a security measure beside the sentence that you would be sent to. For example, Marwan Barghouthi, the Fatah leader, at the beginning of his imprisonment, he was isolated for more than 2 years. As well, Ahmed Saadat, the head of the PFLP, was isolated for 3 years as part of the sentence. Some of the prisoners, they were isolated for more than 10 years in total solitary confinement. The health conditions in the prisons are so bad. There is huge bureaucracy and delay and neglect when it comes for health treatment. Till they take the prisoner out of the prison for a professional examination in one of the hospitals inside Israel, it can take years. People can develop more serious diseases, like it can start with a very simple complaint but ends up with cancer or heart attack or kidney failure. Some detainees lost their life out of health neglect. In the last couple of years, more than 5 prisoners out of cancer and heart attack, they died in prison. Of course, prisoners died under interrogation out of torture as well. In total, there's more than around 230 prisoners that they died since 1967 till today in the Israeli prisons. Of course, the issue of education in general is restricted. Back in 2012, the Israeli High Court said, continuing your study in the open Israeli university is a privilege that we are not supposed to offer for the Palestinian prisoners, and they totally canceled this procedure. So now they are not allowed to register even to the Open Hebrew University, because Palestinian universities were never allowed to reach and to have access to the prisons inside Israel. So these prisoners, like, imagine if you don't, and for sure none of them, they are allowed phone calls. There's no public phones in the sections of the Palestinian political prisoners, which means if you are punished from family visits, you have no way how to contact your family. You could be totally disconnected from your family for several months or several years, and you can just rely on lawyers' visits like myself and my colleague that can, and in some time we also would be banned from doing these visits. For example, in hunger strike time, most of the lawyers would be facing restrictions because then the system would claim we are transferring information between the prisoners and helping in arranging and coordinating the hunger strike. This would be the excuse why we are not allowed to visit. The last hunger strike was in 2017 that lasted for 43 days actually. Unfortunately, this time with not much success. Like they didn't succeeded to guarantee most of the issues that they were requesting, like the family, to stop all these restrictions on family visits, the healthcare issue and the public phones and so on. They all were refused, and of course it's not easy to go back again for a hunger strike in a short period. So I just wanted to end with case of Ahd a bit, because I know that it's getting much more publicity, not just here but all over. Ahd is actually an example of how easy any child could be arrested and facing such serious charges. She was initially arrested because they were, like, her mother published this video when she slapped the soldier. But later on, when she was charged, Ahd now facing charges of throwing stones and incitement, beside this attack against the soldier. So hundreds of Palestinian children would be facing the same experience as Ahd. And of course, the court will never release these children on bail or under condition till the end of the trial. So Ahd would kept in detention till the end of the trial because she is so seriously threatening the security state by inciting. And by the way, incitement becomes a very serious trend in the last couple of years based on social media activism. So any post on the social media could cause you to be facing a charge of incitement and then ends up with like imprisoned for 1 year, 1.5 years, or 2 years. There is a Palestinian Israeli citizen, woman, Dareen Tatur. She's a poem, and she published in 2015 a poetry that she's talking about the uprising and like martyrs. She was arrested for 3 months, then released on bail. She is still facing the trial under house arrest since October 2015, and the case is not over, and it's about incitement. And like, if you would dig in these charge sheets about how many likes you would get, for example, it doesn't matter for the court. It could be 2, 3, or 5 likes that you get for such a post, or a share of a poster or whatever that you did. And you could have like 50 friends or 70 friends maximum, but still this would be a charge of incitement in the social media. There is lots of control over the social media in the last couple of years. And hundreds are arrested every year because of such activities. So currently Ahd is facing the trial. And the last session, the judge decided to close the doors, so he kicked out all the people who attended in order to monitor, especially the politicians coming from the representative offices in the occupied territories, including the Office of the UN High Commissioner as well, and other organizations like Amnesty and Human Rights Watch and other lawyers from the international bar associations that they were invited. And of course, they don't care about what this would mean on the international level, that they decided to close the doors and to kick everyone outside of the court session. So now Ahd is supposed to answer for the charge sheet. It's next week. Her court is scheduled for next week. So of course, she would be Most probably she would be sentenced for like custodial imprisonment, and it could vary from several months to up 1 year or even more than 1 year. And I would stop here because I think there's lots of details that we can discuss, but it's better to have a discussion. And Sobhi, if you want to add.
I would think it's better to just to have a conversation.